Welcome to Death Care Collective. I'm Keith Page and I'm the host of the show. My guest today is Shannon Martin. Shannon's a senior manager of location experience with SCI, a company she's been with 30 years, and she's based in Denver, Colorado. We have a great conversation, and let me just say, she's a ton of fun to talk to, and she's a wealth of information. I ask her questions about her own backstory into the industry, cremation trends, witness cremations, living funerals, among other topics. I really hope you enjoy the show. All right, I'm here with Shannon Martin. Shannon, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
It is an honor to have you here. I will have already introduced you, so people will know who you are and some of your resume, but that won't stop us from digging back into that resume and hearing about your journey.
All right.
So SCI is a big old player. For people who don't know what SCI is or stands for, give us a quick understanding of who you guys are and what all you do.
Sure. So SCI is one of North America's largest providers of funerals, cremations, and cemetery services. And we support families across the United States and Canada through a network of over 1,900 locations. And our purpose is really just to support families during difficult times and help them create those meaningful ways to remember.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I know you've done a few different things in your role there. Tell us about what all you've done and what you're doing now in your role there at SCI.
Sure. So most recently in 2022, I moved from serving as a funeral home manager at a funeral home and cemetery location here in the Denver metro area. That's where I live. And there was this newly created role. It's a senior manager on the location experience team. So to a lot of people, it's like, well, what does that mean, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I'd say to describe it best, my day-to-day really includes a lot of listening. And that could be spending time reviewing maybe feedback from families we've served. Also looking at research, talking with associates that are serving families, working directly with them every day. And all of that's to help understand, is there an opportunity to improve that customer experience somewhere in there? So once we can identify that, then I work really closely with our team and we focus on a few larger priorities every year. And then we make plans to bring those service offerings to life. That's the fun part. And when I do that, we spend a lot of time connecting with funeral and cemetery leaders at our locations and support them through implementation. And then that's going to give me the chance to do one of my favorite things, which is to visit locations. Because if I say visit funeral homes without context, that might sound strange, but it really is one of my favorite things to be able to visit our funeral homes and our cemeteries and really understand the real experience families are having. And then outside of that, I get to step outside of our funeral homes. Sometimes whether that's speaking locally at an industry event or doing things like this, where I get to share what we're learning.
I love that. So can you give me like a practical example of an experience that maybe you guys found wasn't working as well as it could have been, and then you guys made a pivot and maybe changed or added a new type of experience, and what was the result of that change?
Sure. It was having to do with when families come back to the funeral home to receive their loved one's urn into their care. So it's their choice to then take the urn home. And I think that when we don't think about it intentionally, it can really come across to that family as being very transactional. Yeah. So what we did is we created a program that really addresses from when the family is notified to come back to what that experience feels like for them when they come to the funeral home and some of the things that they get as a support when they go home. So it's really from start to finish. Once they've selected cremation and that they choose to take ashes home, we make that a very intentional, meaningful moment and move away from that transactional feel. There's still things that need to happen, like signing that, yes, I'm taking that person into my care, but we can do that around some other touch points that really make it more personal.
Yeah. During when I was first getting started as a celebrant, I also worked at a local mortuary just to get I wanted to learn the lay of the land. And at one point there was an opportunity to be the person that was there when the family showed up to receive their loved one, via the urn. And I hadn't been I wouldn't say I would have been very well prepared right?
It's much more emotional than you guessed, right?
Yeah, and it was emotional, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I don't want this to feel like I'm just handing them a thing,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And I do believe, if I remember, this was maybe 10 years ago. It seems like there were a couple candles there, and it was like, how do we create a moment that felt a little bit like it was a ritual
Mhm.
to do that? Is there things even that detail that you guys are thinking about, that actual handoff and some words
Yeah.
you say, for example? Can you
For
describe
sure,
that?
not so much the words as much as it is the space, kind of what you're describing.
Yeah,
Is there some sort of moment created? And
yeah,
that can just come from making sure that we're not doing that moment at the counter, right? At the
right.
desk at the front of the
Yeah,
funeral, taking
right.
them to a private space that is intentionally set up to support them in that moment,
Yeah.
giving them an opportunity to spend some time alone,
Mm,
inviting them to that, because I don't think that,
yeah.
just like maybe we didn't realize how emotional it was, I don't think the people coming in realize how emotional it could be,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So
Right.
when they come in and you can say, would you like a few moments?
Mm,
They really appreciate that time to
yeah.
have. And if you're able to put up, a picture of their loved one, just make it nice, right? All the little things that make it nice.
That's
It's
beautiful.
amazing that, you even have, maybe you've experienced this, when you make it nice, they stay longer than they probably would have thought. We've even
Yeah.
had families sometimes go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that it was going to be this.
Mm.
Can I call my sister down the street? Can she come too? I don't want her to
Wow.
miss this, right? So I think that if you would have explained to them ahead of time, like, we're going to do this and we're going to set this up and all this, they're going to go, no, 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 that's
Yeah.
it's not necessary, right?
Right.
Because they don't
Right.
know what they need until they are in the moment.
Right.
They have
Yes.
magic of it.
So it is funny. It's like sometimes we have to surprise them, right?
Yes, yeah, and there's
Right.
not very many surprises you want in funeral service, but
Right.
that is
That's
a
what I was
beautiful
thinking. Like,
moment.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's call them gentle, gentle surprises, right?
Yes, I like
And
that.
just the opportune time. I as I and you also interact with so many people in this beautiful industry, and there's people that are going to be watching and listening who are part of the industry, and we all can probably point to a way in which we ended up here, and
Mm,
and we go, oh, did we feel a calling, or did the calling find us?
yeah.
Tell us about your your way,
Right?
getting called to this
It was
beautiful
quite a
industry.
calling. It was a call that I didn't expect.
Right,
We
right,
want to
right.
keep playing
Talk
off
about a
of that.
gentle. That was a gentle surprise.
It was a gentle surprise. I love listening to other people's stories as well, because sometimes they come from the traditional route of, oh, my dad, was in the business, or some people say, well, I went to a funeral and I experienced that and that inspired me. So mine is neither of those.
No.
Mine is nothing like that. So let me get into it. And it really
Okay.
starts when I was a junior in high school. And I had to take a career, I don't know what you call it, like an exploration class. You think I'd
Hmm.
remember the exact name since it was so pivotal. But
Right. Right.
the big assignment in this class was to choose a career, and you
Mm.
research it all semester. And as I started listening to my peers, they seemed to have it figured out. In fact, I felt like they had their whole life figured out. And I didn't. I
Right.
was really more focused on school being a social event and having fun. So mapping out a career was not on the top of my priority list. So I
Hmm.
just looked at this as a way of like, okay, what am I going to decide to sit through? I'm going to sit through so many of these presentations. Maybe I can choose something that'll at least be like fun to listen to.
Okay.
Um, Choose something that nobody else is going to. So around that time, I happened to come across an article about a new mortuary science program that was at our local community college. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is it. I'm going to do my project on being a funeral director. And at that time, also keep in mind that, I was a captain of the Palm Squad, and that image didn't really exactly fit the
Right.
traditional image
Right.
of a funeral director, especially
Yeah.
in those days. Um,
Yes.
so the whole idea really was a joke. I'm sorry to say, but it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and so now when I tell the story, I'd like to say the joke was on me. Um,
Right.
because the more I learned about the profession, the more I saw that getting to help families during this hardest moments of their lives could really be very rewarding.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
by my senior year, to my parents and friends' surprise, my career choice was locked in, and I declared that I wanted to be a funeral director.
Wow.
Yeah. So a few weeks after graduation, I enrolled in mortuary school and I started working evenings and weekends at a funeral home at one of our SCI locations here in the Denver
Huh.
metro area in 1996.
Wow.
So you
Wow.
can do the math, but the this June will mark 30 years with this company, and
Amazing.
yeah, I would have never guessed. And
Yeah.
over all that time, I've served many roles from funeral director to managing funeral homes and cemeteries. Supporting locations more broadly now is what I do. But
Hmm.
really, at the end of the day, what was a high school project really did turn out to be my call.
That
It's
is,
crazy. Every time
yeah,
I say it, I'm like, that is just so crazy.
it really is amazing. It's very impressive to think that, yeah, like you said, you were doing it more just to be funny, shock, something
Mhm.
unique, something memorable, and then
Right.
to so capture you. What do you think? Was there, the more you looked at it, what do you think still was the draw that captured you about it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think when I look back and reflect, I really think it came down to it encompasses so many different types of careers, so many different
Mm,
types of work that one can choose to do. Whether that be, the psychology of it all and working with people directly, and also there's, some business skills that you would want to have
yeah,
to be able to do that, and also the science of it all when it comes to care of people when they pass away. And all of that blended together into this beautiful career choice where there's so many different aspects that you can focus on.
yeah,
But then I think the overarching thing that really sealed it for me is that the work that you're doing, you get to see the direct results of it. You're not just
mm,
a piece or a step in the process. You
yeah,
are doing something that whether you do it well or not, hopefully not, that it's
right.
really going to impact a person or a family
Mm, yeah,
from now until their next, encounter.
right.
And that's really heavy for some people, but I think it's
Mm,
quite a privilege to get to do that for people
yeah.
when a lot of people say,
And
I could never, right?
right, right, yeah. And it puts us right on the front line of care, and
Hmm.
it puts us on the front line of care with people who are in the most one of the most delicate moments of their life. Did that
Yes.
intimidate you? Did you, like a fireman runs to the fire? Did you find yourself drawn to it, or were you like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is awkward at first," and you found your way into it being more comfortable?
Yeah, I think that I was so interested and so um, interested in being able to provide that service that I wasn't scared of any of it. But
Mm.
certainly there were moments throughout that I can pinpoint and go, okay, that was a bit of getting used to. Whether that be
Yeah,
going into the prep room for the first time, that is a
yeah,
little bit of like, I don't know who does that and doesn't go, oh, this is different.
right,
So there are those moments that are like nothing that you've ever experienced in life. So it's going to take you back a minute. But once
yeah,
you realize that, okay, this doesn't bother me, and I'm sure there's other people out there who just couldn't do this. Just like I look at people who work in hospice care and I go, how do you do that? I could never, and I think everybody just has
yeah,
a tolerance and a gift, and they all work
yeah.
to, bring you to what makes you happy to do and do well.
Wow. That's cool. Speaking as a hospice director who wouldn't want to be on the,
Right.
probably the side that you're on, and vice versa,
Mhm.
but together, right? We get to serve
Yes,
so much of the human experience for folks at really important times.
that's right.
Let's talk cremations because I know statistics of from burial rates and cremation rates used to be, I don't know what percentage. I mean, originally tons and tons of burials, very little
Mhm.
cremation. I don't even know if when did cremation kind of enter as far as U.S. or not. But what is driving now the big movement and how cremations have surpassed full body burials?
Right. Well, that history class was a very long time ago, so I'd hate to give you a wrong date, but it was a
Yeah.
very long time ago,
Okay. Yeah.
longer than
Yeah.
people probably realize.
Yeah.
But
Mm,
I think that what's been really an interesting statistic that's come out in the last couple of years is I think it was CANA, the Cremation Association of North America, who had reported that the U.S. cremation rate is projected to be 75% as early
whoa.
as 2038. So
Okay.
there's still room to grow in some markets. Some areas are already there. But as a
Wow.
whole in the US, that's what they're projecting the rate of cremations.
75% by
Mhm.
2038. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And you ask, like, what do you, is it cost? Is it something more cultural going on maybe
Yeah.
to drive
Yeah.
that? But,
Right.
yeah, I don't think that there is a way to deny the fact that affordability really can be part of that decision.
Sure. Yep.
But that is not the only factor driving that to be the disposition of choice. So I guess if we're really seeing, if we're going to look at it as a broader shift, I think you can start by knowing that how people choose to honor their loved ones is going to continue to evolve, just like it's evolved now.
Yep.
And today, people are going to be more likely to choose cremation. There's some studies out there that would say it's because families are more mobile than they were previously. Families
Mm,
are smaller. They're open to less traditional religious rites. And I'm
for
sure
sure.
there's like a paper or studies that you could read on each one of those points that are very
Yeah.
interesting. But, and just to keep it simple, I think those are some key drivers.
Hmm.
But more important than that, today, I think that's kind of what brought us to this point. But now I think families are really embracing the flexibility that comes with choosing cremation.
Mm,
And they're much more open to personalization and celebrations of life, right? So
yep.
maybe you've been to a life celebration, a memorial luncheon, a farewell party, or maybe
Right.
just invited to like that quiet moment of remembrance or whatever somebody
Mm,
finds meaningful, right? There's no
yeah.
playbook anymore of you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
And I think that that drives things a lot. And in fact,
Mm,
I think you will see more and more funeral homes, as have we seen in some of ours, that the funeral homes are having to serve as life celebration centers just to accommodate these diverse requests because it's not everybody wants the same thing.
right.
So a few years ago, we saw some market research that identified three interesting shifts that I think you might find
Love to hear them.
interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So this comes down to what customers prefer when it comes to choosing their final arrangements. So the first one is I started mentioning it, celebration of life really is the new norm, right?
Mm, yeah.
Celebration of life could be for to describe a variety of memorials, but at the end of the day, it's about wanting to plan something that's about remembering the good times,
Hmm.
sharing stories, and remembering the person.
Yeah.
So they want something modern, uplifting. And I think if all of us have been to a service recently, that we could probably go, yeah, that looks different than maybe a funeral 30 years ago did.
Right.
The second thing that came out of this research is it said that cremation now being the primary choice, there's new alternatives coming about, like
Mm,
water cremation and human composting.
yep.
So now what we're seeing is that people have more choices than ever when it comes to how. So
Yes.
that's going to, or possibly lead to some indecision where it used to be like just this or that. Now it's like
Right.
this, that, and what about these things?
Hmm.
So it's
Yep.
requiring all of us, including funeral directors, we need to be that much more knowledgeable about all these new offerings that are
Yeah.
coming about.
Hmm.
And the third one, this is the one that I find most interesting, and that is that people are looking for close knit, meaningful gatherings. And when I
Mm,
say that, I think it's important to note that simpler does not mean no service, right? People will
right.
say, like, oh, I don't want a service. But I think that's just saying, like, I don't want that. I don't want what I saw somebody else have. I don't want
Yeah.
that formal thing. So when they say not a service, they just may mean simpler. And I'll tell you, I can really relate to this because my friend passed away a couple of years ago. I was in charge of his arrangements. And
Mm,
it didn't make sense to have a traditional, even celebration of life. So we went with a smaller, intimate gathering at my house. We still had a celebrant, though. We still
yes.
had
Yay.
appetizers. Yeah, love the celebrants. We
Yep.
had appetizers, drinks, special music, memory sharing, a video. What
Yeah.
else? A tribute video, and then even favors if some sort of thing for people to take to remember
Yep.
him. And in his case,
For
it
sure.
was little chocolate covered coffee beans, one of his favorites.
Yeah.
So all of those elements that you may have seen in a different type of traditional service or celebration of life existed, it just existed in a little bit simpler way.
Mm,
So he probably would have said, and he did say, don't have a service for me. And I said, well,
right.
we're here and this is what
Right.
I want to do. And in your
Yeah.
honor with the
Yeah.
other people to remember you. But we didn't do it maybe in the way that he thought. And maybe that's why he was saying, please don't for me. So
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so much I want to talk about. I want to say about that from my own experience as well. Having been a celebrant all of these years and seeing families um, usually hire me because they say we've been to too many services where it felt like the person doing it kind of did the plug and play, where they just
Mm-hmm.
insert name here and it was felt very scripted,
Right.
or they didn't want the religious vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke yesterday to a group of secular people. It was a Sunday morning, and they don't go to church, but they're a secular gathering, and they had me come and tell some of my story, being a post-religious person myself. But I
Uh-huh.
also got to talk about being a death doula. Anyways, it was fascinating because two or three of them wanted to talk about uh, they have not done any type of service for their loved ones. Now I'm in East Tennessee now because they've never even heard of a celebrant, and they were afraid to hire a clergy because they didn't even believe in an afterlife. And it would have destroyed them to hear a clergy person get up and say, so and so is now in a better place. And they opted for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And there were so
And,
many other options.
and there were, right?
Yeah.
And so, I got to even create just a moment to just say, what was your daughter's name? One of them was their daughter, right? This older
Mm.
couple, and their daughter died of a brain tumor. And I
Wow.
got to say, what was your daughter's name? They said, it's been 4 years. And they said, we don't know how to talk about her still. And, because
Oh.
we didn't do a celebration. It was beautiful to be able to get them talking, but also
Mm.
a reminder that not enough people know about all these options, Shannon.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's so many different ways to do it. And all you got to do sometimes is talk to somebody about what have you seen? What have you done?
Yes.
Or maybe
Right.
they haven't seen, but they have an idea of what it should feel like. And it can
Yep.
come to life. Like there's really
Yeah.
so many different ways.
Yeah. So, usually when I know this is not always going to be the case because I know there's a lot of other options. Maybe this is a challenge I've had with my own parents
Mm.
passing and them being cremated, and us having my mom and dad both in urns sitting on my sister's shelf in Boise, Idaho, and we don't yet have a plan. What percentage of families are doing that are just don't have a plan, and they've just kind of kept their loved one at home? And
Mhm.
what do you suggest? Why is that happening? What do you suggest me and my
Oh,
sisters do about that?
right.
Yeah,
Well, it's all a personal choice at the end of the day, but I
yep,
think it is important to know that how many people are having that exact same conversation in their family, that
yeah,
they have somebody's urn somewhere in the house. And I think the most recent statistic that came out a few years ago is that 1 in 4 families in the US have somebody's urn or urns in their house.
wow,
Which is
wow,
like, wow, in the one hand, it's like, that's a lot of people. But then if you think back probably on like your own family's interaction or families that you've helped through celebrant services,
yeah,
it probably isn't surprising that that happens,
no,
right?
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I don't think it has anything to do with families that, that they make that decision intentionally. I think it
right,
kind of happens. So they're navigating that moment when the loss occurs and they fully intend to do something later. Is that your family says like, we'll do it later?
absolutely. Oh
Right.
yeah, yeah,
And but after a loss, somebody can be really emotionally exhausted. They may
yeah,
be fatigued from like all the planning that they did.
hmm,
And then when somebody asks them if they do it all, so what are you going to do with the ashes? I don't think a
right,
lot of people have enough information to really answer that question. So taking them home feels like the next, best thing. And then
yeah,
what happens? Life resumes, right? Work,
yep,
kids, responsibilities. We know how it goes. And then
yeah,
what was meant to be that temporary, like in the moment decision is now permanent.
right,
So I'd encourage anybody who has urns at home that wants an alternative now, or maybe they're not ready now, but they know at some point they're going to need to.
hmm,
It's never too late to make that choice.
mm,
It just
yeah,
really isn't.
yeah,
And there's
yeah.
more
That's good.
underneath that, right?
There's
Don't you
what?
think? Don't you think there's more underneath that?
Which part of the
Like
why we've waited?
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, some of it, like you said, there was fatigue even for us. Like we'd already made so many decisions.
Hmm.
And the fact that we didn't have to make that decision, right? I mean, some decisions you have to make,
Right.
and so we had made a bunch of them, and then we thought, well, and it was because my mom was still alive, and so first we had just she got to have dad at home dad's
Uh,
urn, but then she died 3 years later. So it's like, oh, well, now we've got hers. Well, that we just opted for put her with dad. And for a
mhm.
while it was great. They were on display at my, and I think the joke now is Jody, my sister, I hope she's not going to listen to this, or she's going to
Uh-oh.
watch me. I'm
Hi,
going to be in
Jody.
big trouble. Right. Hi, Jody. But I think she finally said, we just had him out for so long. We hadn't made a decision. We put him in the closet now. And
Right.
it's like,
The
and so
migration.
that, and I feel that weighs on her a bit. And, so anyway, so we are making a plan to say, hey, we're going to do a family reunion the summer of 2027. And so let's maybe have a plan and do something with those urns and cremated
Mhm.
remains then, right?
Yeah, I think what you're describing, a lot of people feel, right? There's an emotional attachment there too. It's very
Yeah.
comforting for a lot of people to bring the urn home.
Yep.
And exactly what you said. I have so many friends and family have done the same thing. One parent passes away, they say, well, this gives us we will just bring them home until,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
we'll figure it out. But there's
Right.
not always that further discussion about, well, what happens a generation down the road and the
Yes.
generation after that and so forth.
Right.
Um, and I think most funeral directors, if they're listening, can probably tell similar stories. And maybe you heard these as well when you were in funeral homes, is that there's funeral directors who can definitely tell a story of like a thrift store contacts them and says, hey, the person was sorting donations and they found an urn, or
Yeah.
somebody purchases a home and they
Right.
find the urn in the closet, right?
Yep.
And
Right.
I don't think any of it was intentional. And it was
Right.
just a matter
Let's
of
hope not.
circumstances, right?
Right.
It makes me think of this funeral home of ours. There was a story in the news where they helped an urn get reunited with a family member. And
Mm.
I thought it was so interesting because we got to know a little bit more about, well, how does that happen?
Yeah.
And
Right.
long story short, what occurred is that the son had, I think it was his mother's urn. And unfortunately, he had to go to jail, something like that happened.
Yeah.
Things happen. And so
Yeah.
when he knew
Life.
he wasn't going to be able to hold this, possession, he gave it to somebody else. I think it was even maybe another family member.
Right.
But then time passed, there was a disconnect, and eventually the urn was found by a stranger and then
Wow.
returned to the funeral home that performed the cremation, because there's usually some sort of label that
Oh,
identifies
yes.
that.
Right.
So that stranger said, well, I can't just not do something with this. I think that's very human and interesting too, that people aren't just
Yes.
like, oh,
Right.
no. And so they went through the trouble of getting it back to the funeral home, and then that funeral home helped reunite the urn with the son. And it's
Mm.
like he was so grateful because he just thought like, well, I guess I'm never going to see
Right.
it again, and had no other choice. But
Right.
I think it just goes to show that people don't make these decisions because they want to give somebody up or they want to leave them behind. It's just really important to think about, where would you want to come back to and reflect and
Yeah.
maybe remember, gather at some point and have
Yep.
that plan.
Right. Right. So yeah, so I think about that idea of scattering the ashes versus placing them somewhere where you can actually specifically return to, where they are more memorialized, right? And is that, and I know at cemeteries they often now will have niche walls and things like that. Is there
Mhm.
statistics, or what are you finding? But as far as, are those the options right now? It's either people scatter the remains, right, in the Pacific Ocean, right, or in the mountains, or
Right.
Disneyland. Did you know that one
Yeah.
of the biggest places people scatter loved ones' ashes is Disneyland?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, they should really move forward. I've heard things where maybe they would think about how they could do that in a better way, but I'm sure it's
Right.
a popular spot for
Yeah.
that.
It has to be all stealth, right? It's a stealth
Uh-huh.
scattering. But
Right.
but is there a way that Disneyland could help, versus it being a stealth way, to make it more of an actual honoring way, and
Yeah.
uh, and humanize it? Anyways, and then I know
Right.
there's, like I said, the niche walls. I've also seen where first loved one maybe was buried in casket, full body, but then the
Hmm.
next one wants to be cremated, so then the urn is buried in that same
Right.
plot.
Yeah.
What are other options these days?
Well, I think when we think about memorialization, it's really just about choosing a physical place of remembrance.
Okay.
And I think it's very misunderstood that cemeteries are just for people who choose burial. But that's
Right.
not true. Like you just
Right.
said, one of
Right.
those great options when people make different decisions is that they can do burial and then have the urn placed. That
Mm-hmm.
can happen in a mausoleum, and also private family estates for, a larger
Oh,
family that wants to be all together.
yep. Yep.
Um, but there are lesser known options. And again, I think the more that people can find out about these lesser known options, and
Yeah.
then they might go, oh, that would be a good choice. Maybe for some, not all.
Right.
Of the ashes, but some of those, if somebody isn't familiar, maybe they haven't heard of a glass front niche, and that's
A what? A
a
glass front
glass
niche?
niche.
Okay,
Yes.
tell me about that.
Yeah. So if you don't know, it's
I
where
don't.
it allows for space in a, like a niche, if you're familiar with that, above ground.
Yep.
And it allows room for an urn or urns to be displayed with some personal items. So
Oh.
some mementos, some photos, and
Ah,
then it's behind glass, which is
got it.
really cool. That same friend that I said passed away a couple of years
Yeah.
ago, he was placed in a glass front niche. And a little bit about
Um,
him, he loved his dog. He'd actually been a judge of dog shows for many, many years.
whoa.
So when we got his niche ready, we put pictures in there, some mementos.
Mm,
And what I think is so comforting when I go visit that space is I get to see those things. I don't just have to
yeah.
think about them.
Right.
And the other thing I didn't think about until now I'm in that moment is I think it's kind of cool that if somebody else walked by, just
Yes.
like I do with other
Just
people's,
like that. Yeah.
they're like, oh my gosh. And you get to learn something about somebody that you didn't even know. It's
Brilliant.
just more than their names and dates. And I think that's really cool way to like just connect to other people in a different way. So
Yeah,
outside
it
of
is.
that, there's also columbariums, again, above ground memorials. There's cremation gardens with memorial benches and pedestals. And
Oh.
I mean, just so many different unique things that people just don't know about.
So if somebody's, you're not literally turning ashes into a part of a bench, right? What
No,
happens on
yeah,
those?
there's compartments where those urns can go into, and a family can
Oh,
have that bench. And again, back to like if several family members were buried in a cemetery, and now this next generation might choose cremation, depending on the rules and regulations of the cemetery,
right, right.
the bench can be placed on top of that grave space. Or
Mm,
maybe it's something that you don't want it to feel like that traditional cemetery, so it goes into a garden along a path. I mean,
yeah.
there's just so many different ways that it can happen.
Mm. Have you personally thought through your own wishes? Are you allowed to share those?
Sure. Well, what I like to say is I tell everybody they need to think about it and they need to document their wishes,
Yep.
and I need to do the same. But I think the hard part for me is I'm always learning about something new.
Right,
So
right,
sometimes it's hard for me to narrow down what would that be. And I think then I still need to just force myself to do it, because that's the other thing about prearranging. You can make a change if you want to. It's not set
right.
in
Yeah,
stone.
yeah.
Maybe it is literally your name's etched on
Right,
one
right.
glass. There you can make decisions, but sometimes I think about it in terms of like where you are in your life plan,
Mhm.
like how if something were to happen to me today versus 20 years from now, then maybe
Yeah,
there would be a different plan. So I think that's also important when you make pre-arrangements, is to also
right.
give the family that might be there making the final decisions some, leeway to do what's right in that moment. I think about this
Yeah.
woman who pre-arranged a white limo, or excuse me, a white hearse. It was
Okay.
like, it has to be a white hearse, and that was written in her plan. And when the time came, white hearses weren't as much of a thing, especially where we were at here in Denver.
Yeah.
And the son was just heartsick about making sure that we found this white hearse. And at the end of the day, I thought, well, I wonder what drove that decision. I wonder if she just saw one and thought, oh, that would be nice.
Right.
I hated to think that her son was just grappling with, like, we've got to find this white hearse, when
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. But maybe
Yeah.
it was. So we found one. But I think
Wow.
that's important when people make their decisions, and that's kind of how I'm approaching mine. Is like I want to give them some direction, but at the end of the day, let my family know whatever you decide in the moment. I won't be here to know what's happening. So do
Right.
what's going to make you feel the most
Mm,
supported.
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know I want to, I have a tentative plan. I have like a death care directive during my death doula training. They had us
Yeah.
write a death care directive, which I had to answer all those. But I do want
Mhm.
to make it not so stringent that my daughters, if that's who it is, because it's just me and my adult daughters, that they
Yeah.
don't feel like their hands are tied. So I want to take most of the decision making from them initially, so they don't
Mhm.
feel like, oh shoot, dad didn't have a plan, and so we have to
Right.
come up with a plan. But I'd rather have them inherit my plan with the understanding that if they need to do something different, right,
Mhm.
that they can. But and yet, right now it was a full body burial at sea out of the Pacific Ocean, but
Oh, wow.
which I find fascinating, but I don't really like deep cold water, right? I've always been afraid of sharks, and not that I would be eaten because you sink to the bottom,
Yeah.
but I'm like, well, at least all the oceans attached. So if anybody's in the ocean at an ocean
Mhm.
anywhere, it's kind of like, oh, we can remember Dad or Keith that way, but it
Yeah.
doesn't give them an actual place to come back to. But then if
Mhm.
they're never back in that place, do they feel guilty about never being able to come back to that place, right?
Mhm.
So, anyways, it like you said, it might change over time based on where they end up, where I end up, all those things, and
Mhm.
so. And then it's also sometimes hard to talk about. Like I'm 60, but even when I went through my death doula training 7 or 8 years ago, in my 50s, my girls were like, "Dad, why are you talking about this?" Like it freaked them out to hear
Right.
me talk about it. But I'm trying to encourage more people my age or older to talk about all this stuff because we live
Uh,
in such a death phobic culture.
that's right. Yeah, because I think you and I then have the look that not everybody gets is then it happens and they go, I wish my mom would have told me. I wish
Yep.
that somebody would,
Yeah.
I wish we would have had that conversation. So I had
Right.
some education, right?
Yeah. Because they're
So
suffering if they don't know.
that's right. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just makes it a little bit harder than maybe
Mm,
it used to be.
yeah.
But there's lots of opportunities out there for people to learn and start doing it even at their own pace,
Yeah.
and just taking a little step here and there to
Right.
understand, what's available.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned, if you were at sea, like where would people go? And I think, back to like, why do people like to choose cremation so often and that flexibility is I think that people really like that idea once they learn that it's very common to have ashes go to multiple places and multiple people.
Right.
Uh, I think that
Yes.
that's a really great way that you can reflect your relationship with somebody or to somewhere and tradition and all of those different choices you can make can help bring a lot of peace.
Yeah. There's even like cremated remains jewelry and options like that now. Like what are different ways if people are going to like share their loved one, what are some
Mhm.
different applications of that idea now?
Yeah, so I would say that I think of a family maybe they would choose a cremation garden for part of the ashes. So there is like that centralized place with like somebody's name and dates, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't have to look like a traditional headstone when it's in a cremation garden. That could
Yeah.
be in a boulder that the ashes are actually put into a
Oh,
boulder. So it's very much a part of the landscape, which
yeah.
people really like. And then part of the ashes can go in a little, I think a lot of people do call them keepsake urns, so a
Uh-huh.
very small urn with a small portion. That's great for scattering the small portion. Being
Mm,
able to take it, a lot of people say, "Oh, take me to Disney, take me where it would take me to these places." That's a great way to do that. And then for the people who do want to keep some close, yeah, as we said, can be very comforting. The cremation jewelry can be
mm,
really a great option.
yeah.
Um, some are just where you put the ashes in the jewelry. Some people may have heard of is the memorial diamond, right? The ashes are actually used to create the jewelry piece, the diamond itself. So again,
Wow.
you choose something and there's options.
Yeah.
It's more
Yeah.
and more options.
The one thing I wish it was probably around in 2000. I'm sure it was, but I didn't know about it. My parents died in Boise, Idaho. But that you could get your loved one's fingerprint,
Oh yeah, I love those.
imprinted and have a jewelry piece, and that has nothing to do with their cremated remains, but even
Mhm.
their fingerprint would have just been such a great keepsake and memento about their unique fingerprint and how it touched my life.
Yes, I love that because I'm doing it right now as if I have one on. But I
Yeah.
love the idea that somebody can pick, touch it and rub it,
Yes.
and you can
Right.
feel the indentation. It's not just a
Yeah.
picture.
Right.
I also think those are great options when it's children who want something. Maybe they
Uh-huh.
don't the the weight, or maybe it makes other people nervous for them to be carrying the ashes with them somewhere. And I think
Right.
that a necklace is something that still has that personal touch, but it's something that can be recreated if something were to happen to it.
Yeah. Wow. Lots of options.
I
And
know.
they're gonna continue, I think, to increase in what's available, right, for
Yeah.
types of cremation. processes. There's
Mhm.
also the movement in the whole green burial movement,
Mhm.
and some of that has to do well with from at least in California, you've got to be buried in a concrete vault. So you got
Right.
right. So there's the vault, and that's going in the ground, and all the things going into the ground. And if someone's embalmed, right, that element versus the green burial where they're it's more natural, and
Right.
then I know there's some level of if somebody's being cremated, there's some level of smoke, right? But then
Mhm.
there's that's why maybe the water cremation or the what was the other one, the
Posting.
composting. How many of those are legal right now in where you are in Colorado?
We have a few providers, but across the United States, I don't know what the count is now, but
Yeah,
it seems like the last couple of years, there has been so many states who have either it's already legal, it's in the process of becoming legal,
okay,
and like I said, I don't know what the count is now, but it's
yeah,
happening fast, where more and
okay,
more states are making it an option. And then I
yeah,
think it's just a matter sometimes of it gets legalized, but then it's going to take some time for a provider to come in and get set up to offer the service.
yeah,
But I think that it's something that will continue to grow because I
yeah,
think people, again, once they learn that there's different options, just like all the other things we talked about,
right,
there's something for everyone.
yeah,
And it's just helpful to know a little bit about it.
yeah. I saw a documentary. Some people in Tennessee that were in the funeral industry decided they wanted to do more natural, and they got some land and got the land set apart through the state or federal, and it's more
Mhm.
like a natural burial. Do you know of any? Are familiar with anybody doing that out your way, or
Yeah, I
and
know here in Colorado there are a few, and I think that the Green Burial Council is a great resource to learn about the ones that are available and
okay,
where they're at. And there's different
yeah,
levels of how natural it can be, because
right,
obviously, like, where you're at, you may not have an opportunity to have that kind of land set aside
right,
for that. But if that's really
yeah,
important, it'll show you where those places are.
yeah,
And there are different levels, even at local cemeteries, that I think even if it's a cemetery that is what is considered like a traditional cemetery in a metropolitan area, if a family is just going to be able to express what it is they're trying to accomplish, I think
mm,
most cemeteries will try to find a way to make accommodations. It may not
yeah,
be the full depth of what you explained for traditional green burial, but there
right,
are opportunities to say, well, what's important? One time
mm,
somebody described it to me like this, in that if you were into recycling,
yeah,
you take your grocery bags with you when you go to the grocery store to, save those plastic bags, but it doesn't mean that you're like composting all of your trash. It doesn't mean like all or nothing, but you can.
gradient. There's a great gradients of that, right?
There's ways that maybe something's more important or more accessible or more
I
capable.
like that.
And so I think the same is true for those green burial choices, is that you can ask for what is most important and see what's available.
I love that. Yeah. So go to your local cemetery or mortuary and start there by asking
Yeah,
them
don't
what they
rule it
already
out.
know about. Yeah. Because
Mhm.
you're not the only one asking about it. And there could be, like you said, a great solution that meets your need. And you don't
Mhm.
have to go find some burial land out somewhere else that you would never go back to again.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Um, Witness cremations.
Mm.
For people who don't know what that is, explain what that is, and then what your experience with those have been,
Mhm.
why people choosing them, and what their experience is like.
Sure. So, witness cremation, there are cultural and religious reasons why somebody would want to be present when a cremation takes place. And just for clarification, uh, for most people, having a witness cremation or choosing to have one, it's when the cremation begins. Somebody, the family or the people invited, come to the crematory and they see their loved one placed in the retort, or and maybe stay for the time that the cremation starts
Got
and
it.
have some time together. Um, they typically don't stay for the whole thing. I'm sure there are like religious and cultural customs that do make that part of it. But I'd say that some people choose it also because they want the transparency. There's other people who want participation. It's just
Mm,
another way to participate. So just like a family today, maybe it's their tradition when they go to a graveside service to stay when the casket's going to be lowered.
Yeah.
or just the act of accompanying someone to the grave, right? In a funeral
Right.
procession.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you can kind of think of it like that, but how would you accomplish those same sorts of things and all the reasons why you want to do that?
Hmm.
The witness cremation is a way to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I've accompanied a good number of families over the years to witness cremations. And I think overall, what I'd say about it, it's just so intimate. It's
Yeah.
really intimate. It's very much a meaningful moment for that family. And again, I think that I've yet to see a family go, gosh, I wish I didn't do that. Now, it's
Right.
not for everybody. I'm not
Right.
saying everybody should do it, but I'm saying that
Right.
I have somebody do that and regret doing
Wish
it.
they had. Right. Yeah, that's been my experience too.
Yeah.
Is the families that choose it and kind of, I call it leaning in, that leaning
Mm.
in towards that, wanting to do that, are grateful that they had that somebody provided the opportunity, and that
Right.
for them it was very, very meaningful to be a witness to it, and like you said, to accompany both those things. Uh,
Yeah. And I
for
think a good funeral director is there to help facilitate those conversations, right?
That's
To
right.
just
Yep.
say, you know, this is possible. This, you could do this, you could do that, and not judging. It's just
Right.
saying, here's what's available. What questions do you have? What's important to you? How can I help? Those,
Yeah.
that's what makes that, if anybody's scared about talking to somebody about it, that's what
Right.
a funeral director is there to help with.
Yeah. This question doesn't apply just to witness cremations, but just death or burials and services. And people often try to think they should shield their children from the
Mm,
experience. Oh, we don't want to have our kid, these children at the funeral. We don't want them, et cetera. Right?
right.
How do you still hear that? I still hear that, right, in this day and age. And
Yeah, even more so.
what's that?
I say even more so sometimes because it's just all of those things are so unfamiliar to people.
Yeah.
I can't
So what do
remember
you
what
say?
the statistic is. They don't experience it themselves, so they don't want to put that on their child. And there's of course lots of resources out there to hear a professional talk about that. I'm talking about it from a funeral director's perspective and my years of experience.
Yeah.
I try to just put parents at ease and say, you know, to explain things just like you approach every other maybe hard topic you talk about with your kids. You break it down to what is appropriate for their age.
Yeah.
And you also look for resources and guidance from professionals,
Yeah.
but you let them be a part of it to whatever extent they want to be a part of it.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Again, a story that maybe other funeral directors would have in their lifetime, but I'll never forget being in a room with, you know, it was like a grandma who passed away and it was a visitation. And the family had come a little bit early to see the person, make sure that they were pleased with the appearance and, you know, have some time alone before visitors
Sure.
started to arrive. And the adults were talking about something, and I was kind of near the casket, and I saw the grandkids having they were whispering to each other and you could tell there was a little bit of a disagreement going on. And so I couldn't help it. And I got a little closer. And what they were arguing about is they were like, one said that grandma's feet were gone, and the other said, no, they're not. And they were arguing about it because that, right? They can't see and they've
Right.
never been here before and they didn't know. So I love the fact that the parents had them there. And I love the fact that they were curious. And so I indulged them in that. And, you know, of course, with the parents' permission, I said, you know, here's what the kids are talking about. And so if it's okay with you, I'm happy to open that foot end of the casket to squash this debate. And they're like, oh my gosh, yes. And so I think when we indulge those questions and that
Right.
curiosity, they will go to the level that they want to. And
Yes.
you know, I even did that with my own children, having worked in funeral homes, you know, since they were, you know, born, and
Right.
cemeteries. I never wanted it to be a scary place. So they visited often and, you know, asked the questions, but I never forced anything upon them. And I think it's been a really healthy way for them to now look at, you know, what happens when somebody passes away.
Yeah.
And I'd say one of the funny things that happened though is as I'm learning about all these new ways of disposition, my children are maybe somewhat beside me, kind of hearing and curious as well. And so now my daughter, I have to, you know, maybe talk to her a little bit about this, but she has no problem when a student at school has a, you know, grandma pass away. She'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for your loss. It's very nice. And then she'll say, now, was your grandma cremated or turned into dirt? Because she learned about human composting. And I'm like, okay, we need to roll that back a little bit.
Right.
She's curious, and that's what's important.
It is, and that she has a good understanding that there is something else that happens after death that is ritual and beautiful and natural, right?
I'm proud that she has the compassion. We just got to figure out how to talk about it in a way that doesn't make people uncomfortable. But
Right, right, right. Maybe not roll them all out in the same day, right?
that's
Like,
right. That's right.
awesome. During our Get Acquainted call earlier this week, also, we were talking about living funerals, which is something I've
Oh,
heard a lot about. I don't know how much you've heard of them, but tell people what a living funeral is and what you know about them and what is Dignity or SCI doing things with those.
Yes. So a living funeral, I think it's just a fascinating new way that people celebrate. And it's all for somebody who, most likely is going to have a serious diagnosis, is probably more the person who chooses this, maybe not. But they want to be involved in the planning and they want to be there when that gathering happens. So can you imagine being there to see who did or didn't come to your funeral? That can be
Right,
very
right.
stressful.
Yeah, right.
But
And you get to call them and follow up with them if they're not there.
right, yeah, where were you? But I think this kind of gathering is driven by the same desire for connection, wanting to be more intentional in the planning. It's chosen by people who want to be there to hear the stories their friends and families will share why they're still here to hear it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also about having some control over how you're going to be remembered. And while they're not a common practice yet, I don't think they're that common. You do
Right.
see them more often. I know some of our funeral homes are starting to be more proactive in offering them. Certainly, at any time, if somebody came to any of our funeral homes and said, "This is what I'd like to do," I think any funeral home will be
Oh,
equipped to help that along, right?
yeah.
But I think it will be something that people continue to talk about more and more. So it'll be offered more and more. But I
Yep.
got to
That's
tell
right.
you, there's this one that stands out in my mind, and it's not one that we had. I think it was actually out of maybe it was in Australia, but it was
Mm,
an article I read about because I was researching and wanted to learn about
yeah.
these funerals. And this woman, she had, I think maybe she had breast cancer and she became terminal and she was probably in her late 30s, if I remember. But anyway,
Mm.
she decided to plan her funeral. And I did not mispronounce funeral.
Right. Right.
She wanted a
You want to
funeral.
put the fun in funeral.
She took it to a whole nother level. She sent out invitations and they included a YODO dress code. Do you know what that is?
No.
A YODO dress code. She said it was the dress
You
code
only die
was
once.
you only die once. That's right. So it's like wear, if I understood it right, it was like wear what you want. And maybe it's something you wouldn't wear anywhere else, or you don't know where to wear that pretty dress.
God,
You only die once, so wear it here. Um,
that
and
is
the
great.
event included a eulogy that was performed as a song by one of
Okay.
her friends. I thought that was pretty cool. And
Yeah.
she even went the step of bringing her cremation casket that was going to be used at that time
Yeah.
to the event so people could start to write their tribute notes and draw pictures on it. So, I mean,
Oh,
I think that it can be like that. It could be just a simple gathering of friends, and just like anything today, right?
yeah.
I really think it's an extension of that same cultural shift we talked about earlier that made cremation more popular because at the heart of it, you're talking about flexibility, personalization, and a chance to celebrate life. And that's what we see drive the choice to cremate. So it makes
Wow.
sense. It totally makes
Yeah. I must have heard about them because when I did my death doula training, I
sense.
put that in my death care directive
to
that
have
if I'm a what
to have a living
that I want to be there and
yeah.
that I want to be able to say my goodbyes
Oh yeah.
to people and let them say goodbye to me, and that nothing is left unsaid or undone that can't be right because they say that people we need to say thank you, I love you, right,
Mm,
goodbye. What there's like they said 5 things. Have you heard this?
uh-huh. No, that's really
They say
good.
5 things we need to say before we die, and that people need to say to us. Thank
Oh,
you. Um, I love you. Goodbye. Oh, will you forgive me?
oh, that's an important one.
And I forgive you.
Mm, that's
And
so
so
beautiful.
in my hospice and death doula, I try to get those conversations happening way sooner, because
Mhm.
I know that upon a terminal illness, right, people start to get sideways right away, and all that stuff will rise up and create unnecessary suffering if they don't have it. And if I can get them to those things sooner rather than later, it's going to make the rest of that dying process for the person in the bed and those around the bed much
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah, just more peaceful all
More
around.
peaceful,
Mhm. That's what
Yeah,
everybody wants, right? Like they say, if
right,
I pick, I just
right,
want something peaceful.
yeah.
And I want it to be peaceful the best it could be for my family. So,
Absolutely.
gosh,
And
those
they
are
say that one of the missing components from children growing up is often the blessing of the father.
mm,
And just that idea, even from biblical times, of Abraham, the father of the nation's blessing, right? And
mhm,
whether people are religious or not, I'm not religious anymore, but I still believe the power of the blessing. So when my dad got sick with lung cancer, I jumped
mhm.
on a plane with a video camera and flew there and asked him. I had about 12 or 13 questions I wanted to ask him.
Yeah.
And this is before I'm a celebrant or anything, so it was already clearly, obviously, in me, right? So I asked all
Mhm.
these questions about life and marriage and mom and dad, just stories, history stuff. And then I
What
said,
a
Dad, will you
gift.
just speak into the camera a blessing for each of the kids and grandkids?
Mhm,
Right. And so he was able to do that. But I thought if I were able to have a funeral, right, a
mhm.
living funeral, I would want to speak a blessing as some of my final words, if possible. And if I couldn't say it, I would at least maybe have it written out and let somebody say it for me to everybody there.
What a
Right.
gift. What
Right.
a
Yeah. Yeah. It's just making the most of these moments,
mhm.
making the most of the moments. How you doing time wise? You got a few more minutes?
Sure.
Okay. You having fun?
Yes, I am having fun. I love nothing better than to talk about, I can say what we get to do, what we get to see
Right?
and
Oh my gosh.
experience with
It's
people.
yeah,
So
it's
beautiful.
unbelievable. Yeah. So for people in the industry or others listening, if there's one thing that you really just want them to understand specifically about cremation, let's say, since that's kind of a sweet spot that you're really focusing on, what's something
Yeah.
that you just want all of us to be reminded of or really understand about cremation?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, and that is that cremation doesn't eliminate a physical place to remember. In
Mm,
fact, it just expands the possibilities as to where it can be.
yeah.
So to understand what your options are, so you can create something meaningful and lasting for yourself, your family. It's
Yeah.
really a decision that's going to be beneficial to everyone involved.
Yeah. I had never heard of a glass, what'd you call it? Glass
Glass
face?
front niche.
Glass front niche. Had never heard of that.
Yeah.
And my wheels are turning because I have little knickknacks and things that I've just, sometimes I'm like, I'm a 60-year-old kid. I still have a couple of Hot Wheels and different things on a
Oh,
shelf. It's like my knickknack shelf, right? But I'm like,
yes.
wait, so if I was in a part of my ashes were in a glass niche, I
Yeah.
could have my lowrider 64 Impala Hot Wheel there and a picture of me and my daughters and other things that are important to me. And like you said, when somebody's walking by, it's not just John Keith Page,
It's
1964 to
mhm,
2037, but they are there's some things that say that describe more about that person. So I
mhm.
just brilliant. I don't know how
Yeah.
series came around to that, but they're like, oh yeah, let's not put them in a niche and put a marble front on it.
Mhm.
Right? But
They're
let's make
just amazing, and they serve almost like a bit of a museum, right? Because somebody who
it.
passed away, I think of one at the cemetery I was last at, where I worked, and there's a flip phone in the glass front niche. It is
No,
next to your purse. And it's like, you're gonna be able to go past that, and in like 15 years, people are like, what is that?
right, right. What is that large thing?
Curious and questions and why was it important to her? It'll make people ask a lot of
Yeah.
questions and be so
Oh,
interested.
it's so fun.
Yeah.
You also, I know you're a fan of listening to podcasts. Is it, by the way, is this your first podcast you've been a guest on?
Yes, if I have, if I start a bucket list, I have never done one before. I put this now as like something I could check off a bucket list.
Check
No, this is
check
my
that
first
sucker
one.
off. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I know
love,
you like listening to podcasts. You're a fan of what
yeah.
genres do you listen to? And then what are you listening? Is there anything you're listening to right now that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I'd say the genres are vast. They go anywhere from like leadership podcast and Then I might move over to some sort of industry podcast, something funeral directors talking to funeral directors. And then there's my kind of like TV that's not great for you, like reality TV. I do have a guilty pleasure of listening to some of those podcasts about reality TV and entertainment news and the serious news. I do those too. I've really enjoyed a good hang. I think it won an award recently.
Yeah, it's like number 2, I think, in all the podcasts.
And that one's a nice blend of just like easy listening when life is, you just want something easy while you're doing something else. I'm a big multitasker with podcasts. So, that's been one of my favorites recently that I just started listening to last year. And good. Now this one. Now I'll add this to my list.
Right, Death Care Collective. I think when I really pitched it to you, we were using a different name, but the official name now is Death Care Collective. So put us on your faves and listen to other people like us that are chopping it up and talking about what we're learning and how do we address, and maybe this is a final question, is how do we continue to, although we're living in a bit of a death phobic, death denial culture, how do we continue to, or how are you seeing people hijack the death phobic, death fear stuff and try to create positive conversations other than the funeral home?
Right. I think, that's tough. I think it is. I think it's just bringing it to the surface to have podcasts about it. I think that's a big way that people can start going, well, that's interesting, and not feel on the spot to have the conversation themselves, but to start learning a little bit. I think that's a really important way. And I think it's also that when we're not, whether you're in funeral service or not, or connected in some way, to when somebody is going through it, to be that person that can just listen and ask questions. I think that's important. If we can all just a little bit more be comfortable in the uncomfortableness that can come with talking about this. And I think it will.
Yeah, that's good. Have you heard of death cafes?
I have. I've been to a few myself. Not for a while. But I think that's another great opportunity for somebody who really wants to have the conversation, but maybe the people around them aren't ready. And so you can go and learn, and maybe then they take that information and take it forward. I think it's a great opportunity for people to learn.
Yeah. If you're listening and you have, the things Shannon and I are talking about, you find interesting, and you're like, I can't talk to my partner or my friends about this. The next dinner party, I'm not going to bring this up. Go to Death Cafe. I believe it's deathcafe.com. There's like 12,000 that happen around the world. And I'm going to be starting one in the springtime, and it'll be both in person and probably Zoom. So more info on that. But death cafes are a great opportunity. I want to write some curriculum for high school, because we talk about sex ed, we talk about health ed, we talk about home ec. I'm like, we ought to have death ed.
Yeah, that's
ought to be a whole thing on what is it, just the idea of being finite beings and having people write purpose statements about the fact that we're finite and how are we going to live, and that, just to normalize it for young people. Right.
Make it less scary. Yeah. Once you know a little bit more, you're less likely to be as anxious, or at least it reduces it.
Yeah. The mortuary I worked for a little bit in South Orange County had a once a quarter or every twice a year called Unmasking the Mystery Tour, where they gave people tours of their mortuary and behind the scenes. Do you guys ever do that?
Yeah, we definitely have different seminar programs where we can do that. There's also back to our memorial parks, a place for the living. There are opportunities to come to cemeteries often for things that don't have anything to do with going to somebody's funeral. It can be about coming to take a tour, to look at nature, to find out about, who's there, the history of the place, or just to come and celebrate a community event. There's so many different things that can be taking place at a cemetery that at the end of the day, it does open it up to somebody to go, oh, I didn't know that.
Right. Yeah. At first, when I used to hear, being in California, we hear about Hollywood Forever, which is
they have some really cool events.
Right. I mean, they show Wizard of Oz every year, and I think they showed the last episode of Breaking Bad there. And
I think the more you can do to show that a memorial park is somewhere where you want, like, I mean, you maybe don't go there every day, right? But that it's somewhere that you wouldn't mind going,
Yeah.
but it's not a scary place.
Yeah. Shannon Martin, you are a good hang. Let me
Ah,
tell you.
it's been great to hang with you, Keith.
You can hang on my podcast anytime.
Thank
And
you.
can I have you back again sometime?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come and chat.
Okay. Okay. And I'm sure other folks that you work with there at SCI might bring some other cool flavors. So if for people that want to find out more about you, SCI, what all you guys are up to, where can they
Mhm.
find you?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is to go to dignitymemorial.com, and
Okay.
there you'll be able to see all kinds of great content about things that are available, questions answered, resources if you're interested.
Okay.
The dignitymemorial.com is a great place to
Okay.
start.
All right. Hey everyone. Thanks for checking us out again. Again, thanks to Shannon. And go to dignitymemorial.com. Check out all the cool stuff they're doing. And dare yourself to take a lap around a cemetery and just be present. Be present with yourself. Be present with the memories of all of those who are there. Watch maybe others that are there, that are maybe having a moment there. They're paying honor and tribute, or they're cleaning a grave marker, or they're bringing flowers, or they're having a picnic, or they're walking the dog. I've seen people exercise. Right? Just challenge yourself to embrace this part of life that we don't talk about enough. And I'll see you again soon for another episode of Death Care Collective. See you, Shannon.
Thanks, Keith.